In the stillness of the night, as darkness enveloped the stately manor house, one man, gripped by deep anxiety, weighed his position with unprecedented seriousness. His thoughts swirled around the newly crowned king, whose power now hung over him like the sword of Damocles. Despite pouring out rivers of gold and providing invaluable support to the future monarch, a chill of fear crept into his heart of possible treacherous retribution. But before he could give vent to these gloomy reflections, he had a much more urgent task before him: to get rid of everything that could be an unnecessary burden in the forthcoming escape. At the same time, not far from the scene of his gloomy reflections, Ignette, a woman of strong and resolute spirit, was frantically gathering the necessary things. Her actions were full of determination and haste, for time was of the essence. With each folded object, her heart grew resentful of the man who, in her opinion, had disregarded her advice, ignoring the warnings of impending danger. Now that the danger was becoming more palpable with every passing moment, they both had to leave their familiar abode to seek refuge in the night's gloom, leaving behind all that was dear to them. In a moment of tense preparation for escape, when the atmosphere was saturated with fear of the unknown, the man, trying to bring a note of peace to the situation, offered Ignette some wine. The offer sounded like an invitation for a small break in their chaotic reality, for the journey ahead promised to be exhausting and long. In her heart, Ignette realized that her husband was trying to deceive her, for in all their years together he had seldom shown any concern for her welfare. This fact was more obvious to her than ever. Nevertheless, being in a situation where the choice seemed illusory, Ignette made the decision to comply. Perhaps deep down she was looking for a moment of peace, or perhaps she just wanted to believe in a tiny gesture of caring on her husband's part, despite all the past offenses. With these thoughts, she touched her lips to the glass, expecting that a sip of wine would bring her at least a little comfort at this critical moment. The next moment, however, shattered the rest of her hopes. As soon as the wine touched her lips, the glass slipped from her weakened fingers and shattered on the floor, and Ignette, clutching her throat, began to cough up blood. That moment was the culmination of betrayal, when the last hope of salvation and understanding dissipated into thin air along with the crumbling glass. She realized the bitterest truth that the man she trusted with her life was the cause of her worst nightmare. At that fateful moment when Ignette's life was teetering on the brink, her husband stood before her, devoid of all pity. There was no reflection of penitence or pain in his eyes for the deed he had done. He looked upon her as an unnecessary weight that was now forever cast off. Ignette's heart filled with a bitter rage and a thirst for revenge that flared up in her with unexpected force. It was the first and last desire she allowed herself to feel fully. But before her world was finally plunged into darkness, out of the blue, a voice rang out in the room, making her husband's heart stop with terror. That voice belonged to Hines, a man whose name was known to many but few knew his true power. In the next second, Hines accomplished what Ignette most desired. He took her husband's life, thus freeing her from his cruel oppression. Hines was no mere avenger. His name had long been heard in prophecies and legends as the one who would come to restore justice and order. This man possessed strength and determination enough to end any obstacles to his goal. And so, Hines, the future victor of the war, was destined to become the new king of the barren empire, leading it to new heights and rebirth. In the last moments of her life, Ignette was gripped by a deep longing for Hines. She felt her life force slipping away, leaving not even a drop of energy to see his face one more time, to imprint him in her heart. Hines, for his part, felt acute pain and regret at the realization that he had arrived too late, before he could give Ignette the chance for a new life, for freedom from suffering. Ignette's mind raced with the thought of how her fate might have turned out if Hines hadn't taken on the task of conquering the Black Forest. This twist of fate that changed their lives forever hovered in her mind, turning into a dream of another world where their fates could weave together differently, where there would be the possibility for happiness, for a life together. But these reflections, these questions about what might have been, remained unanswered, carried away by the wind of inevitable fate, opening the door to a world where there was no longer room for her dreams and desires. 8 years ago, in one of the castles overlooking the vast lands, hidden from prying eyes by protective forests and mystical mists, an event occurred that left an indelible mark on young Ignette's life. Her father, a man of power and influence, has invited his daughter to his house to deliver a message that could turn her view of the near future upside down. "Your wedding will not take place," he declared imperiously, as if passing judgment. The reason was that Grand Duke Hines Ascalon, Ignet's chosen one, had been sent to conquer the Black Forest. The task entrusted to Hines's shoulders was extremely difficult and dangerous, for the Black Forest is known for its impregnability and the secrets lurking in its dark depths. Sending Hines on such a risky endeavor on the eve of his wedding was an unexpected and shocking decision. Ignet's father, despite his daughter's possible feelings, took the decision for granted, for the interests of the state and matters of power are often placed above personal relationships and feelings. He explained to Ignet that the wedding would have to be postponed until Hines returned, which could take an indefinite amount of time, given the unpredictability and dangers lurking in the Black Forest. Thus, Ignet's future found itself suspended on a thin thread of expectation, full of uncertainty and anxiety about the fate of her lover. All her dreams of a quick wedding, of a life together with Hines, collapsed in an instant, leaving behind only the weight of waiting and hopes for the safe return of the chosen one from the forest depths, shrouded in darkness and mystery. Ever since she was a child, Ignet carried in her heart the dream of marrying Hines, which seemed to her the realization of all her hopes and dreams. Her life was not like that of an ordinary high society girl. She always felt lonely, standing on the sidelines of family joys and worries. Her family didn't seem to notice her existence at all, favoring the other daughter. This selective love and attention left a deep imprint on Ignet's soul, awakening in her a desire to prove her worth and earn the love and respect of her loved ones. In pursuit of recognition, Ignet tried everything she could to earn her family's attention. She strove to be impeccable in everything, in her studies, manners, and art, striving to meet the highest standards of an aristocratic upbringing. However, despite her best efforts, the response was only coldness and indifference, which only increased her feelings of loneliness and rejection. This cold reception from the family prompted Ignet to decide to become the perfect duchess for Hines Ascalon. She saw in it not just a marriage of convenience or the union of two powerful families, but a chance to find her place in the world, to prove her worth, and finally to find love and recognition so long unavailable to her. The possibility of becoming a duchess seemed to her like a light at the end of the tunnel, a promise of a new life where she could fulfill her potential and prove to everyone, including herself, that she was worthy of love, respect, and happiness. For Ignet, Hines was no mere bridegroom chosen by calculation or duty. He became the symbol of all her hopes and dreams for the future. In his image, she saw the light at the end of the tunnel, the opportunity to find long-awaited happiness and love, leaving behind the years of loneliness and alienation. His absence, necessitated by the need to participate in the conquest of the Black Forest, was accepted by her with sadness, but also with the realization that all these trials were only temporary difficulties on the road to their shared future. Ignet waited for his return with infinite patience, in her heart constantly lulling herself with the thought that each day she lived without him would bring her closer to the moment when they would finally be together. Then one day a maid entered her room unexpectedly, bringing news that would change everything. The words that her father was expecting her and that Hines's name had been mentioned in her father's conversation made Ignet's heart race in anticipation of the news concerning her fiancé. Perhaps it was the message she'd been waiting for. Perhaps it meant Hines was coming back and their life together would finally begin. Without wasting a moment, Ignet, gripped with excitement and hope, instantly made her way to her father. Every step she took was filled with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, for her heart told her that something important was about to happen, something that could change the course of her life forever. She raced through the corridors, her dress fluttering behind her like a banner symbolizing the beginning of a new era in her destiny. Ignet was preparing to meet her father, where she might learn news that could dispel the clouds of uncertainty and fill her heart with the long-awaited light of joy and happiness. Ignet entered the room where the air was filled with expectation and seriousness. Her steps were cautious and her gaze filled with trepidation before the important news her father was about to announce. The one whose face radiated sternness and intransigence unabashedly announced the decision that was to radically change the fate of his daughter. Completely unexpectedly for Ignet, he announced his divorce from Hines, who was her husband, and his intention to remarry her. Her father's words sounded like thunder, for Ignet had not even realized that their relationship could be broken so suddenly. Ignet's thoughts swirled in a chaotic whirl of doubts and fears. She tried to grasp at any thread that might explain to her why Hines might no longer want her as his wife. However, when her father revealed the reason for such a drastic decision, a different, equally shocking truth was revealed to Ignat. It turned out that it was all about the money Hines had stopped sending. With this news, the girl was completely unaware of the financial arrangements between her father and her husband, which added bitterness to the already difficult news. Ignat's dumbfoundedness reached a climax when she realized that a relationship that had seemed sincere and pure was actually marred by her father's financial interests. This discovery forced her to look at what was happening from a completely different angle, to rethink many moments of her life and her relationship with Hines, which seemed to be built on love and mutual understanding. In one of those moments when life seems unfair and cruel, Ignat's father thundered out, declaring that receiving money for a wedding is nothing but the norm, a tradition that should not be challenged. His words were not merely a recommendation, but a strict order. Ignat was to follow to the room, obeying her father's will. For her, raised in a spirit of unconditional service to her family, where love and respect seemed to be the reward for obedience and loyalty, this development was a real challenge. Everything she had learned since childhood suddenly turned against her, reducing her entire raison d'etre to cold calculations and monetary transactions. Ignat faced a harsh reality in which her own desires and aspirations were worthless sand before the powerful tide of family obligations and traditions. She realized that she had not the slightest chance to influence the situation, for she had no leverage over the family. The only way out Ignat saw before her was to obey and agree to a new marriage. The possibility of remarriage, paradoxical as it may sound, seemed to her the only salvation and a chance to somehow improve her situation, or at least not to aggravate it. One quiet and seemingly ordinary day, Ignat's life was suddenly overshadowed by an event that will forever remain in her memory. Her faithful maid Lena, who had become not only an au pair but also a sincere friend, decided to take a desperate step. Lena's courage was shown when she overcame fear and doubt to plead with Ignat's father to reconsider her decision to marry. This act of courage and devotion, however, was brutally repressed. The father, whose heart had been hardened by years of seeking power and control, found nothing better to do than to answer the plea with force. The blow delivered to Lena was such that it momentarily knocked her off balance and sent her to the ground, where she found herself surrounded by a pool of her own blood. This action was not just a physical act of violence, it was a statement, a powerful and unapologetic outcome that warns anyone who dares to stand in the way of Father Ignat and his goals. It was a clear message from his side. Anyone who went against his will would meet a fate no better than Lena's. This moment was a turning point not only for Ignat, but also for their whole house, coloring the ordinary life with shades of fear and submission. This event left an indelible mark on Ignat's heart, forcing her to rethink many aspects of her existence and her relationship to family ties. In a dark chapter of Ignat's life, shrouded in the shadow of betrayal and the bitterness of loss, there came a moment of seemingly final curtain call. As fate would have it, her path was cut short by the hands of her third spouse, the epitome of the betrayal and cruelty she had faced on her life's journey. In the last moments of her life, when the world around her seemed bleak and hopeless, Hines was at her side, the only ray of light in this darkness, a symbol of unshared love and support. His presence provided comfort and warmth in these final seconds, filling Ignat's heart with fleeting joy amidst the chaos that had descended upon her. But suddenly, as if by magic, there was an unexpected upheaval. Ignat suddenly woke up in the cozy surroundings of her room, where every detail reminded her of a familiar way of life. She felt confused, unable to tell if what she was experiencing was just a dream, frightening and realistic, or if she was in some mystical afterlife where the boundaries of reality had been erased. Going to the mirror, Ignat stared at her reflection. The mirror, like a mirror portal through time, revealed to her a truth that was hard to realize. Her appearance was visibly younger, as if the hours of her life had been magically rewound. At that moment, she realized that for unknown reasons, she was in the past. This realization caused a flood of tears, tears of bitterness for the ordeal, and tears of joy for the chance to start anew. This moment of rethinking and realization became a new point of reference for Ignat, when the past and the future became intertwined, giving her hope to correct the mistakes she had made and the opportunity to change her destiny. While Ignette was immersed in a whirlwind of emotions from her unexpected return to the past, another unexpected yet touching moment lit up the room. In the doorway appeared Lena, her faithful maid and friend, whose loss had been one of the hardest things in Ignette's life. The scene of Lena leaving this world was forever etched into Ignette's memory, leaving an incurable wound there. So seeing her again, alive and unharmed, was like a miracle that was hard to believe. Happiness and joy at the sudden meeting with a friend whom Ignette had thought irretrievably lost overflowed her heart. Without the slightest hesitation, she rushed to Lena, embracing her with such strength and warmth, as if she were trying to convey through this gesture all the feelings that had accumulated during their separation. Lena, for her part, seized with bewilderment and embarrassment at such sudden affection from her mistress, was unaware of her own tragic fate that Ignette had experienced in the reality from which she had returned. This moment of reunion was filled with deep symbolism and emotional intensity, showing not only the joy of regaining lost connections, but also giving Ignette hope that she now has the opportunity to rewrite history, avoid past mistakes, and save the lives of those she loves. With newfound determination in her heart, Ignette pondered her next steps in this unexpectedly given second chance at life. Her gaze was full of determination, and a vow was ripening in her heart that none of those individuals whose actions had caused the destruction of her previous life would escape the retribution she deserved. At this moment of mysterious fate, when Ignette was already preparing to fight for her future and justice, Lena suddenly interrupted the flow of her thoughts with her remark. Lena, noticing the dark shadows under Ignette's eyes and her slightly disturbed look, suggested that the reason for such deep concern was the upcoming wedding. Ignette, as if returning from deep meditations on revenge and justice, hesitated for a moment, wondering which of her 3 weddings she was referring to. There were 3 pivotal moments in her life connected to the vows of the marriage bond, and each left an indelible mark on her soul. However, Lena, completely taken aback by Ignette's reaction, quickly clarified the situation by pointing out that this was about her first wedding to Hines. There was an innocence and simplicity in this explanation, for to Lena, who had no knowledge of Ignette's journey through time, everything that was happening seemed part of the ordinary preparations for a solemn event. For Ignette, however, this revelation sounded like a thunderclap, reminding her that she was facing not only the task of restoring justice, but also the opportunity to relive her first wedding to Hines anew, this time with knowledge and experience that she had not had in the past. Ignette, with unwavering confidence in her voice, expressed her desire to be present at her own wedding. This statement seemed so obvious that even the birds outside the window stopped their chirping, as if waiting for her father's reply. The father, a man stern but fair, looked at his daughter through the prism of their family's long-standing traditions and customs. His answer was cautious, deliberate, as befits a senior member of the family who is responsible for the fate of his loved ones. He emphasized that such a decision required a good reason, as if testing his daughter's resolve. Ignette, without getting lost, with the logic and coolness of a strategist, recalled Hines, her lover, who was at that moment at war. Her reasoning was ironclad. If Hines sought the king's help to get permission to return home to attend the wedding, it would be ridiculous and strange if her family didn't take action. In her opinion, the most logical and proper step would be to send Ignette to the wedding to emphasize the significance of the event and respect for the upcoming marriage. Having received the long-awaited consent from her father, Ignette sank for a moment into a reflection that made her look at her life from a completely different angle. This moment of epiphany was a turning point for her. She realized that in the past, perhaps in another life, her boundless love and devotion to her family had not been reciprocated. This bitter truth, like the cold wind of an autumn morning, passed through her soul, leaving behind a trail of insight. With this new understanding, Ignette came to the decision that she would no longer expect the love and acceptance from her family that she had previously lacked. She realized that true survival for her was not an endless attempt to win their approval and love, but an opportunity to free herself from the chains of expectations and responsibilities that held her back. The decision to leave my family behind was not an easy choice. It was an act of self-preservation and self-respect. Ignette realized that the path she had chosen would lead her to a new life where she could find herself and her place in the world without relying on convention and the expectations of others. In the solitude of the carriage, the wheels of which clattered monotonously on the paving, a quiet but tense dialogue unfolded between Ignette and her mother. Her mother, with bewilderment in her voice, could not understand why it was so important for Ignat to attend a ceremony where her chosen one, Hines, would not be able to be there because of his military service. In her eyes, the wedding was a mere formality, not to be taken so seriously, especially in the absence of the groom. "It's just a formality," she remarked, as if trying to convince her daughter that her participation was unnecessary. Ignat, however, was well aware of her place in her parents' hearts and how little they valued her feelings and aspirations. This knowledge had poisoned her soul more than once, causing her acute pain and loneliness. However, in spite of all the pain and disappointment, she did not allow herself to wallow in self-pity. Her heart was full of determination and love for Hines, the only man who had given her a sense of true affection and reciprocity. At this moment, crossing the thresholds of her own fears and doubts, she was preparing to face one of the most important events in her life, her wedding. It was not just a rite of passage or a social formality for her. It was an opportunity to emphasize their commitment and love for Hines, even in his absence, proof that their bond was stronger than any obstacles that might stand in their way. Ignat realized that she had to go through this day alone in the absence of her loved one, but her spirit was not broken. She knew that her love and loyalty to Hines was the foundation upon which their life together would be built, despite all the hardships and separations they would face. Lena, one of the companions, suddenly interrupted the silence with her exclamation that she had been fortunate enough to see the most handsome man under the sun, like an angel descending from heaven to earth. This man, who appeared as a dream come true, turned out to be a messenger who arrived at the wedding in place of Hines, who had failed to leave the battlefield. The appearance of this authorized person was unexpected and mysterious. His appearance and the gleam in his eyes instantly attracted the attention of all present, but they made a particularly strong impression on Ignat. The man's gaze, full of warmth and unknown depth, instantly made Ignat's heart shudder, as if in his eyes hid the whole world with all its secrets and beauty. This moment was something of a magical revelation for Ignat, suddenly illuminating her path. The moment her gaze met the messenger's, she felt a strange and powerful sense of connection, as if fate itself was hinting to her of something significant and important that was about to happen. That look became for her a symbol of hope and a harbinger of important events that would change her life. The man came closer and immediately addressed Ignat and her mother with a greeting full of respect and goodwill. In response to his greeting, Mother Ignat gave him a piercing, attentive stare, as if trying to read his thoughts and intentions. Her gaze was so penetrating it could have confounded anyone who was hiding their true motives. The seriousness of the moment was emphasized by the silence that enveloped the room for a moment, foreshadowing an important conversation. Mother Ignat, wasting no time, decided to get to the point of the meeting. Her voice was calm, but there was determination in it as she began to discuss the question of the ransom, which Hines, in her opinion, had ridiculously underestimated. These words struck Ignat like a thunderbolt, making her shudder with surprise. It was not just about money, but about her family's honor and future. The man, trying to keep his composure, smiled strainedly in response, as if trying to lighten the mood, and remarked that 10,000 gold pieces was a very substantial sum for such a ransom. His words sounded convincing, but Ignat's mother was adamant. Her surprise and dumbfoundedness reached a climax when she mentioned that her husband, Ignat's father, had informed her that Hines had actually offered only 3,000 gold pieces. This moment was the culmination of a conversation in which every word weighed a ton and the stakes were higher than ever. A conversation that began with a simple greeting turned into a fierce discussion about justice, the value of honor, and the importance of family ties. All this took place under the critical gaze of Ignat's mother, who, despite the man's best attempts to soften the situation, stood as adamant as a rock, ready to defend her family's interests to the last. As the tension in the air reached its climax, Ignat turned to her mother with dignity and firmness in her voice, urging her to back away from the dangerous edge of the conversation. She was deeply aware that such talk could do irreparable damage to the reputation not only of her own, but also of Hines, whose name had been unwittingly dragged into this maelstrom of gossip. With conviction reflected in every word, Ignat tried to convey to her mother that the consequences of such discussions would prove extremely damaging, and that even their family's greatest accomplishments could be eclipsed by a dark cloud of gossip and innuendo. She warned that when her father found out what was happening, his frustration and anger could be irreversible, marring all the joy of their family life. The mother, listening to her daughter's words, suddenly stopped, as if a sharp, cold wind had pierced her heart. Something like understanding or perhaps regret flashed in her eyes, but she quickly hid her feelings behind a mask of nobility. With a pride that was all her own, she announced that she had done her duty, in an attempt perhaps to protect the family welfare. But now that the words had been spoken, she felt ill at ease. "The rest will be on you," she said, as if leaving that heavy weight on her daughter's shoulders, retreating into the shadows to hide her exhaustion, or perhaps the realization that intrigue and family drama could have deep and lasting consequences. A fire of shame flared in Ignette's heart as she bitterly realized that the only thing her mother wished for her future was to marry her daughter off advantageously in order to make the most of it. This cold calculation of her mother laid a heavy burden on her shoulders, filling Ignette's soul with a sense of loneliness and the realization that no one cared about her fate and personal desires. The priest, standing in front of them, as if a messenger of the impending change in her life, solemnly announced that it was time to begin the ceremony. His voice sounded like a sentence from which there was no escape. He invited Ignette and her unwilling companion, the man she was meant to be, to follow him. Their footsteps echoed in the silence, leading them to an unknown future. Before the ceremony began, the priest left them in the restroom, as if giving them a chance to come to terms with the inevitable and prepare for a pivotal moment in their lives. This brief pause in anticipation of the momentous event was a moment of truth for Ignette, when she felt most acutely the gravity of her position and the hopelessness of her situation, standing on the threshold of an unknown future, where someone else's decisions and desires were leading her. Ignette glanced at the man, overcoming her embarrassment as she had an important request to make. After exchanging glances, Ignette and the man, as if by some unknown conspiracy, simultaneously decided to make their requests. In this quiet act of mutual respect, the man granted Ignette the right to be the first to express her will. With some hesitation, but in a firm voice, she expressed her request that the man give the letter to Hines, the person most significant to her at that moment. This letter was more than just inked paper. It carried the weight of her hopes and feelings, becoming a critical message that had to reach the addressee in person, bypassing prying eyes. Ignette, feeling embarrassment envelop her words, supplemented her request with the stipulation that Hines should answer her directly. She wanted the answer to come to her, not fall into the hands of her family, where every word, every confession could be read and misinterpreted. This moment, though filled with nervousness and uncertainty, revealed the depth of her desire to maintain a modicum of privacy and direct connection with the person she trusted with her deepest thoughts. The man, meeting Ignette's piercing gaze, respectfully promised that he would personally handle the delivery of Hines's reply. There was an unwavering confidence in his words that gave Ignette hope in her heart. She was full of conviction that Hines would not leave her request unanswered. After all, Hines was the one person who had stood by her side in the moments of her last breath in her past life. This bond, strengthened by trials and farewells, could not be broken by time or circumstance. Although Ignette was now deprived of the ability to see him before her, she found comfort in the fact that she could keep in touch with Hines through his faithful messenger. It was like a thin, invisible thread linking their hearts at a distance. The knowledge that Hines would be her husband again filled her soul with light and warmth, giving her the strength to accept her present trials. In the back of her mind, Ignette clung tightly to that thought as an anchor that helped her not get lost in the whirlwind of events surrounding her in her current life. In the heart of the exciting moment, when the atmosphere was filled with anticipation and excitement, the priest, like the herald of a new chapter in life, announced the beginning of the ceremony. This iconic moment, when two destinies come together under the watchful eye of heaven, was met with a special sense of anticipation. The man, realizing the depth of the moment, held out his hand to Ignette as if inviting her to step onto a new life path with him. Her heart beat in unison with each step, leading them down the aisle where they would seal their promises and dreams. Ignette, standing on the threshold of a new chapter of her life, experienced moments of deep inner reconnection with herself. Devotion to Hines, her lover, had grown into more than mere emotion or promise. It was like coming home after a long wandering. In a previous life full of trials and abandonment of her dreams, she could only dream of this moment. But now, facing fate and in the arms of love, Ignette was not only experiencing the rebirth of her long-held dream of becoming Hines's wife, but also the profound realization that this time she would not let the chance slip away from her. Though deprived of seeing his face today, she felt his presence in every breath, in every gust of wind, filling this moment with eternal love and hope for a shared future. In ancient times, when wise rulers led their nations through the storms of history, there lived an emperor whose dominion extended to the farthest frontiers. His heart was filled with pride and love for his two sons, who were like two sides of the same coin. The eldest son endowed with kindness and compassion for his people, but possessed a certain weakness that prevented him from making firm decisions. The younger son was like a spark in a dark forest, shining with his intelligence and ambition, but his heart was darkened by narcissism and the abyss of greed. The emperor, seeking to ensure the welfare of his people and a just legacy for his descendants, made a decision that would be a turning point in the history of the empire. He decided to divide his mighty state into two parts so that each son could rule his share. However, the father's love for his sons turned tragic, for the youngest inherited lands that did not match his ambitions and lust for power. These lands were less fertile, and their borders did not hold the promise of greatness that the younger son sought. Angry and feeling destitute, the youngest son made a fateful decision that would change the course of history forever. In an act of treachery and greed, he murdered his father, the great emperor, and falsified his will to usurp the throne and power over the entire empire. As he ascended the throne, he was transformed from a mere younger son to a tyrant whose ambitions knew no bounds. His reign was marred by his lust for conquest and expansion of his dominions, for now in possession of absolute power, he sought to expand the boundaries of his dark dominion, bringing destruction and chaos to lands that had once been sheltered from the storms under his father's protection. Thus began a new era for the empire, an era in which the shadow of the tyrant stretched far beyond its original borders, sowing fear and despair among those who once looked forward with hope and faith in a brighter tomorrow. When the world around him was suddenly filled with a sparkling glow, Hines stepped from the depths of an unknown portal, like a gateway to other dimensions. His gaze slid over his surroundings, assessing the changes that had taken place during his absence. With every moment he spent away from his homeland, he became more and more aware of the cost of being able to travel through space and time. These distant journeys required not only a huge amount of mana stones, a rare and powerful source of magical energy, but also the possession of unique skills that were only available to a select few. There was a voice in his head, an invisible companion to his adventures, who never ceased to wonder at the high cost of such journeys. That voice, which for years had been an integral part of his existence, suddenly brought a message that made Hines think. Even though Ignette had become his wife, that elusive voice that could penetrate the mind of any being met an insurmountable wall. Up to that moment, there had been no one whose thoughts had remained protected from its all-penetrating gaze. But now that Ignette had bound herself by the bonds of marriage to Hines, the voice found that her mind had become inaccessible to its intrusions. This discovery raised many questions about the nature of the bond that had solidified between Ignette and Hines, and the new boundaries that now limited the abilities of the mysterious voice. As the conversation between Hines and the mysterious voice emanating from the sword itself continued, Hines couldn't help but notice that his own thoughts also remained shielded from any outside intrusion. The voice recognized, with some surprise, that Hines was indeed no ordinary man. His unique connection to the mana stones, the very power that nourishes and sustains the very existence of the voice, made his mind hidden from any attempts at penetration. This voice, sounding from the depths of the sword, was not just an echo or a random phenomenon. It was the direct result of the magical link established between Hines and his weapon, allowing them to communicate on the level of thought. On the other hand, Hines expressed surprise about Ignette. In his eyes, she did not possess any outstanding abilities or unique traits that could explain her invisible voice protection. It seemed especially odd considering that the marriage to Ignette was arranged mainly for financial reasons, not for any hidden qualities she might bring to the union. But at the same time, Ignette herself was different from the image that these circumstances could have created. Her personality, her soul, seemed to Hines an enigma, a mystery that he strove to unravel. Unable to understand what lurked in the depths of her mind, Hines could not escape suspicions and questions about Ignette's true nature. These reflections prompted Hines to think deeply about the bonds that unite people's destinies. How could Ignette, a seemingly ordinary woman in a marriage of convenience, possess the same impenetrable protection as he, a man whose existence is closely intertwined with ancient magical powers? At the heart of her message, written with the ease and excitement that only a freshly bride can feel, Ignette poured out her feelings of joy and gratitude that fate had brought her together with Hines. With bubbling emotions, she talked about her new status. She was no longer just her father's daughter, but Hines's loving wife, which gave her a new sense of meaning and purpose in life. But along with warm words, the letter also contained a request that opened the door to the complex world of family and financial ties. Ignette addressed Hines with a request that might seem unusual, but was dictated by a deep understanding of the situation. She requested that Hines send their marriage allowance directly to her rather than to her father, who she said would soon make such a demand. The move, according to Ignette, will not only strengthen their family bond, but will also provide her with a degree of independence and confidence in the future. She assured Hines of her eternal devotion and love, promising that such a gesture on his part would be appreciated and would strengthen their relationship. In addition, in her letter, Ignette touched on another sensitive aspect of their union. She warned Hines about a possible divorce letter that might come from her father and asked him, in case of its appearance, not to take it seriously and just tear it up. It was an act of desperate hope to preserve their union against all that might separate them. Ignette saw in Hines not only a husband but also an ally, ready to be a fortress for her in the storms that might await them. Her words were full of determination and faith that together they could overcome any adversity, keeping their love and devotion to each other unshaken. In the depths of his consciousness, Hines encountered a realization that was unusual for him. All his life, he had relied on his unique ability to read the minds of others, which saved him from having to delve into understanding other people's emotions and experiences. This trait gave him confidence in communication, allowing him to anticipate the desires and intentions of others. However, the current situation required Hines to think about another person's feelings in a more traditional sense, without being able to see into their thoughts, which was an unexpected challenge for him. At this moment of reflection, Hines was approached by his ward, interrupting the flow of his thoughts. The news, or rather the lack of it, of Hines's father, who usually took an unwavering interest and strictness in the affairs of the kingdom, hung in the air with his appearance. It was a kind of quiet alarm, silently marking the depth of the problem the family was facing. The ward noted that the usual primness and diligence with which Hines's father approached public affairs had this time given way to a silence that could not be overlooked. The problem the ward was talking about was the demand of the Ignette family. They were asking for money intended for Hines's military campaign, which put him in a particularly difficult position. This explanation for Hines's absence from his own wedding was a powerful argument for understanding the depth of his internal conflict. Hines was caught between his obligations to the kingdom and his personal feelings, the clash of which required him to make decisions that carried heavy consequences. As Kane was about to leave the room, his attention was suddenly intercepted by Hines's determined voice. With unwavering seriousness in his tone, Hines expressed his need for information about the Ignette family. This point underscored the growing complexity of the situation, in which Hines felt the increasing pressure of circumstances that demanded not only his personal attention to matters, but also a strategic approach to information gathering that could help him better navigate the situation. At the same time, elsewhere, Annette was preparing to visit the shopping district. Her decision to explore this part of the city may have been motivated by a desire to take her mind off her problems for a moment, or simply by a need to acquire necessities. However, her trip did not go unnoticed by her loved ones. Almost imperceptibly for Annette, a new member joined her and her escort, a chaperone probably summoned by Lena. Lena, who was concerned for her mistress's well-being, felt it necessary to provide Annette with additional protection as she wandered the busy streets of the shopping district. This gesture of care emphasized not only the depth of the bonds between the characters, but also revealed the peculiarities of their characters, where Lena's care and foresight were intertwined with Annette's independent spirit, striving for autonomy even in such troubling times. On that particular day, as the sun shone over the kingdom, Sir Grick took on the role of protector and guide for Ignette. She remembered his presence by her side at the wedding, which was not only a symbol of nobility, but of sincere support at such an important moment. Ignette, whose heart was overflowing with joy and excitement, gratefully accepted his offer to accompany her to the shopping district. There they were to find everything they needed for the upcoming celebration so that the wedding day would be remembered forever. Suddenly, her sister, Rosalie, suddenly appeared in front of Ignette. She appeared out of nowhere, bringing a touch of surprise to their day. Rosalie, excited and with some urgency in her voice, addressed Ignette with a request. She asked Ignette to attend a meeting of the patronesses in her, Rosalind's, absence. It was not an easy task, given all the preparations for the wedding, but her sister's request seemed important. The meeting of the patronesses was a significant event where matters concerning the welfare and future of their lands were discussed. Such an assignment from her sister presented Ignette with a choice: to focus on her personal preparations, or to help her sister by assuming her role at the meeting. Ignette, standing in front of her sister Rosalie, said with a sense of responsibility in her voice that Rosalie should attend the meeting of the patronesses in person or give advance notice of her absence. After all, such events required personal attendance and participation. However, feeling the weight of the upcoming event, Ignette also recognized that she herself would not be able to replace her sister at the meeting. She had her own pre-wedding duties that required considerable attention and time. Rosalie, when met with rejection, did not hide her disappointment and began to beg Ignette to perform at least the minimal action of putting her name in the patroness meeting attendance book. It would have been a symbolic gesture, but to Rosalie it seemed to have great significance. Ignette, affected by her sister's insistence, had not yet had time to make a reply when Rosalie, without hearing immediate assent, ran away abruptly, leaving Ignette alone with her thoughts. At that moment, puzzled and a little worried, Ignette wondered about Rosalie's behavior. Her sudden disappearance made Ignette wonder when Rosalie would finally show maturity and start taking responsibility for her commitments. The moment immersed Ignette in reflections on the complexity of relationships between loved ones, the fine line between support and the need to let go, to allow her to make important decisions on her own and learn from her mistakes. When Lena, one of Ignette's close friends, asked with curiosity and some degree of concern whether Ignette had decided to attend the meeting of the patronesses after all, the answer followed quickly and decisively. Ignette, with lightness in her voice but firmness in her decision, explained that her path lay in another direction. She had an important date ahead of her, a meeting she couldn't miss. It wasn't something to be postponed or ignored. It was a moment that could determine her future. In a past life, Ignette wasn't just some outsider in her husband's trade association. She invested her mind, labor, and soul to turn the business into a true success story. Her efforts proved pivotal in the prosperity of the business, but recognition and reward for her contributions always remained beyond her reach. Everything she did went without the thanks and recognition she deserved, leaving her empty-handed. But this time, Ignette was determined not to let past mistakes be repeated. She was not going to miss the opportunities that lay ahead of her. This moment in her life was a turning point where she could decide her own destiny without letting circumstances or other people determine her path. Ignette was determined and ready to meet someone who could be the key to a new life, where she would not only invest her energies and talents, but also receive the recognition and rewards she deserved. In the heart of a small but picturesque town where every corner held stories of the past, Ignette stood on the threshold of an important decision. After reflecting on all the vicissitudes of her existence and inspired by a dream that had long been in her heart, Ignette decided to purchase the store. It was not just a whim or fancy, but a deliberate and conscious choice. She put all her soul and energy into this idea because she was not just going to buy a building, but also to breathe new life into it, to make it part of her destiny. The contract was signed, and the very next week the store was to be her property, a place where she could realize her ideas and dreams. However, not everyone shared her enthusiasm. Lena took the news with dismay. She knew how much effort and time it took to raise the amount of money Ignette was now going to invest in her dream. By working at the temple, Ignette not only found her calling, but was able to set aside funds that Lena now felt could be spent more carefully. But Ignette was not one to retreat in the face of difficulties or doubts. In her mind were still vivid memories of her past life, where despite all her efforts and aspirations, all her savings were taken away. This bitter experience had taught her to appreciate the moment and to seize opportunities without putting life on hold. So, standing on the threshold of a new beginning, Ignette not only sought to realize her long-held dream, but also to prove to herself and others that every step taken with faith in herself brings her most cherished desires closer to fulfillment. It wasn't just a store purchase, but a step towards a new life filled with meaning and the joy of knowing that you're not living for nothing. In the heart of the shopping district, amidst the busy streets where hundreds of people searched for their little treasures every day, stood a building, seemingly unremarkable and old. But despite its humble appearance, the location was extremely favorable. This corner of the city was teeming with potential customers hungry for new and unique finds, making it an ideal place to do business. Plus, a small cosmetic renovation would be enough to turn it into an attractive place for those who wish to open a business here. However, it was not only the obvious advantages of its location and ease of renovation that were behind the decision to purchase this particular building. The deeper, hidden reason why Ignette insisted on the purchase was much more personal and mysterious. It was secret information, known to her from her past life, the details of which she couldn't share with others. This secret held the key to something great, something that made the purchase of the building not just a business move, but a step toward the realization of a long-held dream or mission that had remained behind the scenes of her ordinary life. With this unknowable purpose in their hearts, Ignette and her companion went to the marketplace that was the epicenter of their current affairs. The market in the shopping district was a place where the destinies, interests, and desires of many people were intertwined. It was here, amidst the hum of the crowd and countless benches, that the essence of their visit was revealed. They were approaching their ultimate goal, the motives for which were as multi-layered and intriguing as their mission itself. Amid the lively market clamor, Ignette addressed her companions with a request that was not to Lena's liking. This caused tension in the air, for Ignette expressed her desire to go to the market all alone. Her intention to meet with someone key to their mission required sensitivity and subtlety. Ignette's purpose was to draw to her side this important personage, whose overcautiousness might be disturbed by the sight of her escort. She felt that the presence of others would only add to the tension and could derail the entire meeting. Isaac Baekwoon, a man with a unique history and background. He came from a long-vanished family of nobles, possessed not only a rare talent, but also sincerity in his relationship with Ignette. Their bond was unique. Regardless of his work schedule, Isaac stayed close to Ignette, sharing a variety of stories with her, making their friendship especially valuable. His genuine interest in the lives and legends of the past, and his ability to see the world through the lens of amazing stories, made his company for Ignette not just a welcome addition to everyday life, but a source of inspiration. Thus, Ignette's decision to go to the meeting alone was not a frivolous whim, but a deliberate move to accomplish a goal important not only to her personally, but to their entire cause. That afternoon, Ignette, endowed with determination and a slight sense of trepidation, went to the city's busy marketplace. Her purpose was quite unusual. She hoped Isaac, known for his penchant for stealing, would encroach on her purse. This risky plan wasn't just a whim. There was a clever strategy behind it, devised with Lena and Sir Grick to do nothing more than track Isaac. This idea seemed rather dubious to Ignette, for she was well aware of all the risks and the fickleness of luck. However, no alternatives were foreseen, and this plan was the only chance of success. The cool morning turned into a warm afternoon and then evening, but Ignette never met Isaac. She wandered around the market, looking at the faces of passers-by, hoping to see familiar features. Her steps were aimless and her gaze intense. All this time her heart had been pounding in anticipation of Isaac's sudden appearance, but to her disappointment, not a shadow of him. As evening fell, the market gradually emptied. The merchants gathered their stalls and exchanged the latest news, while the customers hurried home. Ignette, whose legs were growing tired from the endless wandering, was beginning to realize that her plan might have failed. But in the back of her mind she still held a spark of hope, believing that her efforts had not been in vain, and that the next day would bring new opportunities for the realization of their plan. And so, as dusk began to fall on the streets, enveloping the market with its mysterious twilight, fate decided to intervene in the course of events. Suddenly, in the blink of an eye, Ignette's purse was decisively snatched from her hands. The girl's heart froze and then beat with renewed vigor as she recognized the thief without a shadow of a doubt. It was Isaac, whose appearance at the market had already seemed unlikely. Without wasting a second, Lena, the faithful maid and ally in the scheme, instantly got in Isaac's way, trying to block his path. But Isaac, who was unexpectedly determined and strong, effortlessly pushed Lena aside, eager to escape with his prey. It seemed that the outcome of this chase was already decided and Isaac would be able to escape from pursuit. But then Sir Grick, whose presence had gone unnoticed until then, entered the arena. His sudden appearance was like lightning cutting through the night sky. With an unexpected agility and speed that completely surprised both Ignat and Lena, he instantly shortened the distance between himself and Isaac. Sir Grick's angry and determined look did not bode well for the thief. At that moment, it was clear that the girl's plan, despite all the previous failures, was coming to fruition thanks to an unexpected ally whose determination and swiftness exceeded all expectations. Sir Grick, inspiring authority with his status and demeanor, expressed his opinion that Isaac lacked pride. In Grick's opinion, it was the lack of this feeling that led Isaac to such unworthy behaviors as stealing from girls. From his point of view, pride was more than just a word. It was a symbol of honor and dignity that every self-respecting person should carry. Isaac, whose life had been filled with trials and hardships, reacted to Sir Grick's words with open irritation. He suggested that Grick look at the world through his eyes, that he should taste hunger and want before judging his actions. His response was one of pain and disappointment. For Isaac, pride had long since lost its original meaning. Since he had lost everything but his life, the word pride had become an empty sound. Isaac was convinced that people who had never starved to death had no right to judge him for the ways in which he chose to fight for his existence. His determination and desire to survive in this cruel world acted as the main motive leading him through all the difficulties he faced on his journey. In the shadows of the past, where every step left an imprint in the sands of time, Ignat carried a spark of hope in her heart, not for herself but for another. Her search for Isaac was not driven by a lust to capitalize on his undoubted talents, but was motivated by a feeling deep and sincere, a feeling that is born not of desire but of understanding and sympathy. In the past, when times were different and their paths were just beginning to intertwine, Isaac had opened the pages of his life to her. Pages modeled with tales of struggle and suffering, of a life filled with obstacles he overcame, but which left his soul saturated with deep sadness. His voice, heartfelt and sensitive, always echoed in her heart with a melody full of sorrow and sadness. Now that the circumstances of Isaac's life had turned against him, leaving him in the clutches of a starving existence, Ignat felt she could not stay away. Her soul, imbued with a desire to ease his burden, sought ways to help. She knew that the job offer wouldn't just give him a chance at a fresh start, but would be a testament to the depth of her care and desire to see him not just as someone with talent, but as someone who deserved a better deal. Ignat saw Isaac as not only a talented individual, but also a soul in need of support and understanding. Her desire to help him was not an empty gesture, but a deeply thought-out decision that came from a heart willing to reach out to someone in need. She wanted Isaac to once again find the strength to look to the future with hope and confidence, discovering the new horizons and opportunities that life had to offer him. Isaac, shrouded in the shadow of misunderstanding and pain, trudged through life with a burden of unsolved mysteries that left indelible scars in his heart. His family's fate, consumed by the darkness of false accusations, led to their unjust demise, leaving behind only questions that Isaac could never find answers to. Why did his family, without trying to justify themselves, accept the fate that cruel reality had prepared for them? Why did he, the weakest among them, stay alive, escaping from the death that had taken everyone he loved? Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years, and all the while Isaac lived with a dream of revenge, a thirst for justice that seemed to him the only purpose of life. He dreamed of the day when someone would reach out to him, give him the strength to stand up and fight to restore his family's honor and finally find peace in his tormented heart. And so, when hope seemed but a pale gleam, when dreams of vengeance and justice had all but faded in his weary soul, Ignat entered his life as the herald of a new beginning. Her gesture, simple but full of deep understanding and sympathy, was a symbol to Isaac that his prayers had been answered. Ignat's outstretched hand didn't just promise him an opportunity for revenge, it gave him a chance at a new life, a chance to rethink his desires, and perhaps find a new purpose that would bring him not only peace, but a meaning of existence, freeing him from the shackles of the past. That moment when Ignat reached out to Isaac was a turning point in his life, marking the beginning of a journey toward healing and the opportunity to retaliate, not in the heat of anger, but with the strength given by understanding and support. As the wheels of the carriage rolled smoothly over the trampled road, there was a tense but lively atmosphere inside. Isaac, though he remained wary, realized that this was the moment to open the door to his thoughts and share them with Ignette. He, shrouded in the cover of his experiences and inner struggles, was not prepared for the revelation that followed from his companion. Ignette, as if reading his secret thoughts, stunned Isaac by laying bare before him the knowledge of his deepest thirst for revenge. Her words, piercing and hard, cut through the silence of the carriage, exposing Isaac to not only his own impulses but opening his eyes to who he really was. She stated that Isaac was the true heir to his family, the holder of rights and responsibilities that were destined for him by fate, but also at the same time a burden of the past. However, the most important thing in their conversation was not the question of inheritance, but the question of choice. Ignette, with seriousness in her eyes, addressed Isaac with a question that could determine the course of his future life. Was he really going to follow the path of revenge? This question forced Isaac to look deep into his heart, to explore the darkest corners of it, to find an answer that would not only be true to his desires, but would also meet the challenges that fate had placed before him. This moment in the carriage became more than just a dialogue between the two characters. It became a kind of crossroads at which Isaac had to choose the path he would follow next. Immersed in deep thought, Ignette pondered the difficult and dangerous path Isaac had chosen to achieve his goals. Her gaze, piercing and assessing, reflected an inner struggle between the desire to help Isaac and the realization that revenge was a path that required not only willpower, but also considerable resources. She concluded that in order to realize his revenge, Isaac needed a power that could provide him not only protection, but also the ability to strike at the heart of the forces that were hostile to him. With that thought, Ignette pointed to her latest acquisition, a small but promising store that could be the key to amassing the very power and influence Isaac so desperately needed to fulfill his schemes. This store, she thought, was the perfect starting point for Isaac, a place where he could not only prove himself, but also gradually earn the influence necessary for his ultimate goal. These words and the vision of the future they painted before Isaac caused a wave of emotion in him. His eyes filled with tears, tears of gratitude, relief, and renewed hope. Ignette's words touched the very depths of his soul, igniting a fire of determination and a desire to prove not only to her but to the world what he was capable of. The tears streaming down his cheeks were not a sign of weakness, but a testament to the fortitude and steadfastness that now burned even stronger in his heart. Isaac, overwhelmed by his feelings and at the same time encouraged by Ignette's faith in his strength, made a firm promise. A promise to show what he was really capable of, and to achieve the revenge for which he had traveled so long and hard on his thorny path. The moment Ignette wrapped her arms around Isaac, something deeper than just a hug was in the air. It was a symbol of hope and faith that the long-awaited revenge they both longed for would finally come to fruition. Ignette believed that after the fulfillment of this burning desire for retribution, Isaac would be able to find his way to peace and tranquility, that they could both leave behind their tumultuous former lives and start fresh. This desire for peace and quiet was not only Isaac's dream, but Ignette herself, who also seemed to be seeking solace and release from the shackles of past hurts and disappointments. Sir Grick, watching this scene, could not hide his surprise. In his eyes, the choice of Ignette seemed very unusual. Isaac, though descended from nobility, had lately been known more as a thief than a noble knight or worthy ally. Nevertheless, Ignette's confidence that Isaac was the perfect choice to accomplish what he had planned was unshakable. She saw him not just as a man of questionable reputation, but as a true fighter, capable of more than his past mistakes and missteps. Ignette argued that despite all the misunderstandings and prejudices, Isaac possessed exactly the qualities and abilities needed to achieve their common goal. Her belief in his potential and virtue was not just words, it was a firm conviction based on a deep understanding of his personality and capabilities. Ignette's confidence that Lena would keep their secret was as strong as steel. She knew Lena well enough to realize that this person would not divulge secrets, especially such important and personal ones. When it came to Sir Grick, however, Ignette had doubts that were hard to push away. Not that she suspected him of betrayal, but his reaction to their plans could be unpredictable. Sir Grick had always been something of a rock for her, supporting her from her earliest years. He had supported her many times when she needed it, creating a special bond of trust and respect between them. Thinking back to all the times Sir Grick had been her support, Ignette realized that his wisdom and strength could be key to their current cause. Her decision was a weighty one. She wanted him on her side. Ignette realized that including Sir Grick in their circle of intent would not only strengthen their position, but also add to their confidence of success. She knew that his experience and ability to see with his heart made him an indispensable ally in any endeavor. She believed that with his support they could achieve what they wanted, for Sir Grick was not one to back down in the face of difficulty. His loyalty and dedication to the work he undertook was impeccable, and his ability to see through problems and find solutions to the most complex situations made him an ideal ally in their difficult endeavor. When Ignette asked Sir Grick about his loyalty to her family, the answer she received made her heart beat faster. Sir Grick, whose reputation as an unyielding knight was known far beyond their lands, admitted that he had not yet come to a final decision regarding his commitment. It was something unexpected, for a knight, loyalty was not just a word, but a fundamental principle of life. Ignette was aware of the complexity of the moment. Sir Grick was at a crossroads, weighing his duties and loyalty, which made his decision extremely important. Seeing this as not just an obstacle, but an opportunity, Ignette felt the door to something important opening before her. She saw a chance to not only gain Sir Grick's trust, but to deepen their bond by asking him to be her personal knight. It was a proposal that intertwined honor with the opportunity to stand up for ideals and values close to both their hearts. Ignette, turning to Sir Grick, asked him to hang on to his decision, making it clear that her proposal was not a mere formality, but a step towards creating something more than just a knight and his lord. Sir Grick, for his part, readily agreed to think about her proposal. This agreement was accepted by Ignette with joy and gratitude, which was reflected in her smile. This moment was a testament not only to their mutual respect, but also to the deep understanding that had begun to sprout between them. Ignette realized that Sir Grick was the man whose support and loyalty could be crucial to their common cause. Ignette's stomach suddenly began making sounds like distant echoes of hunger, so loud that they could not go unnoticed. It was impossible to argue with this, and without wasting a moment, she asked her faithful coachman to direct their carriage towards the nearest restaurant where she could satisfy her hunger. At the restaurant, Lena suddenly remembered the meeting that Rosalie had mentioned earlier. It wasn't just a reminder of an event, it was a reminder of an obligation that Ignette seemed to have to fulfill. But Ignette, to Lena's surprise, showed no interest in complying with this request. This was something completely new and incomprehensible to Lena, for in the past Ignette had always put her sister's interests above her own, acting almost automatically in her favor. Now a very different Ignette appeared before Lena, one who seemed to have rethought her priorities and decided it was time to take care of her own wants and needs more than ever before. This change in Ignette was so unexpected that Lena felt dumbfounded. She could not understand what could have happened to cause such a radical change in the character and behavior of her mistress. As soon as Ignette and Lena had finished and were finally able to fully settle down in a cozy corner of the restaurant, saturating the air with the aromas of freshly prepared dishes and waiting for the beginning of their culinary journey, they were unexpectedly joined by Lady Lisa. With her appearance, the air around her seemed to fill with new energy. Lady Lisa, known for her refinement and nobility, did not waste a moment to express her warm congratulations to Ignette on her recent wedding, thus adding another reason for joy to the day. However, there was more than congratulations lurking in her voice. After a brief but cordial exchange of courtesies, Lady Lisa, passing with ease from one topic to another, made a sudden request of Ignette. The tone of her voice changed, becoming more serious and deliberate, and there was a glint in her eyes that could indicate the importance of her next words. It was not just a request for help, it was a request filled with trust and confidence that Ignette, despite all the recent changes in her life, would remain the reliable and responsive person to whom she could turn at any time. Lady Liza's request was a mystery wrapped in politeness and delicacy, but at the same time it hinted at the seriousness of the situation in which Lady Liza found herself. Ignette, though surprised at the treatment, could not help but feel the weight of the moment. In the course of her unexpected address, Lady Lisa revealed the nature of her request. She found herself in a predicament due to the unexpected absence of her interpreter at a critical moment. The visit of a high-ranking guest from the East was scheduled for the near future, and postponing the meeting could have had a negative impact on delicate diplomatic relations. Lady Lisa, who was not only noble but also shrewd, saw in Ignette the ideal candidate for the task. Ignette, with her outstanding linguistic abilities, seemed to be the only solution to the situation. For Ignette, this appeal was not just a request for help, but also a reminder of her debt of gratitude to Lady Lisa. In the past, thanks to Lady Lisa's support and assistance, Ignette has been able to make significant progress in her endeavors, including saving enough money to buy a store. This act of kindness and support was forever in her heart, and now that the opportunity to repay the kindness had arisen, Ignette could not turn away. The realization that she could be a key link in preventing diplomatic misunderstandings and contributing to the success of the meeting filled Ignette with a sense of responsibility and dedication. She realized that her participation would not only help to maintain good relations between her country and the visitor from the East, but would also be a sign of respect and gratitude to Lady Liza, whose support was invaluable to her. Thus, when faced with a choice, Ignette did not hesitate to help Lady Lisa, showing her gratitude and willingness to stand up for important diplomatic interests. In this decision, professionalism, personal loyalty, and deep respect for the connections that had helped her in the past merged.